I'd also say that the biggest story is still Kenny Pickett. And it's not because last year it was just, what will Kenny Pickett look like? Will he be able to stand up? Will he be able to do anything? Will he be the first string, second string, third string, whatever? This year we kind of had more of a sense. And now it's more like, all right, how good will Kenny Pickett look compared to last year? How much smoother will he be? How much more advanced will he be in his progressions? How will he look when the Steelers are when you're seeing the Steelers work with their receivers and much more in sync? And how much will that pay off going into the season? There are those out there that think that Kenny Pickett won't do anything. I think that Kenny Pickett will just kind of look like how he did as a rookie, and that'll be it. But then there are those out there who think that he's on the edge of being something special, and all he has to kind of do is kind of lock in, build chemistry with his receivers, and get there. I'm more on the side of the latter. I covered him in college when he played at the University of Pittsburgh. I saw hit all the work that he put in. I talked to a source of mine that was close to the team that told me how even last year, while he was the backup quarterback and he was trying to figure out ways to get reps to understand what's going on with the first team, he would come to the facility before practice and he would privately just go over the play sheet they were working on as if he was on the first team. And then he would go to workouts and then warm-ups and then the actual practice that everyone else is doing. Kenny Pickett is a worker, and he's put in a ton of work. He only took like 2 weeks off this entire offseason, 1 week after the season was over, and then another week when he was getting married. And that's kind of where he's at. Now, the question is, how will that work pay off? We'll find out as they report to camp on Wednesday.
Chris, what I wanted to ask you, when you were covering Pickett in college, what was it with the jump in production that you saw in his final college season compared to his previous seasons as the Pittsburgh quarterback? Like, what was it in the jump in production that you saw on the field as a player that led to him having a terrific final year at Pitt, and then that leading to, hey, I'm going to be a first-round draft pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers?
Truly, Mark, I always thought it was this. I thought it was because his receiving core finally delivered. And for those who don't know what Mark's talking about, Kenny Pickett in his 3 years leading up to his last season at Pitt had 12 touchdowns and 6 interceptions, then back-to-back years of 13 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. Shout out to all the Pitt fans out there who love 13-9 jokes. But in his last year, that went up to 42 touchdowns and just 7 interceptions. That broke Deshaun Watson's ACC touchdown record. And it did surprise a lot of people. But the biggest difference, I don't think it was as much Kenny Pickett. He was sharper that year. But the biggest difference was Pitt's receiving core took a huge boost with Jordan Addison stepping up that year. If you go back and you look at 2020 and the season records and look at like Pro Football Focus, I still believe Pitt had the most drops of any receiving core in college football in 2020. They switched receivers coaches, and that led to some success because the steep receivers became more consistent. Even guys like Taysier Mack, who was more of a second and third receiver, Jared Wayne, guys like that, they were more consistent. And with Jordan Addison leading the way, Kenny Pickett just exploded. He had a lot of talent with him. And I think it was just he had better options to take advantage of what he was seeing on the field. Kenny Pickett was a warrior, even when he was getting those 13 touchdown, 9 interceptions years, where he was having to force a lot more passes because there were plenty of touchdowns dropped. I covered the 2020 season during the COVID year. There were about, I'd say, at least 3 games that they lost that they could have won had their receivers just caught the ball more consistent. And we're not talking about winning combat catches. I mean, wide open, Kenny Pickett read the defense, and it was just a simple drop. And it was like, man, that's rough. But in 2021, it still happened a little bit, but it didn't happen nearly as much. And I think you just saw the explosion of his numbers because of the wide receiver group's success. And Kenny Pickett, beyond all else, he is a leader. Beyond his talent, beyond everything else. And one thing that happened, they lost to, I think it was Western Michigan in like week 3 of the season or week 4 of the season. And there was just all sorts of despair. Everyone's like, well, this isn't going to be a special year. Pitt's still, average and isn't going to do anything. And then Kenny Pickett and Damar Hamlin, by the way, as a group, they called a team meeting and they said, this will not happen again this year. And they then went on a tear. It brought focus to the team. They were able to push forward. They ended up getting they ended up winning the ACC that year in the ACC championship. Also, I misspoke. Damar Hamlin did it with him the year before in 2020 when they kind of needed to rally from another point. But Kenny Pickett was the leading force in the 2021 year. That leadership cultivated a culture that is still permeating at Pitt. They won 9 games last year. They hadn't won 9 games in 2021 since like the 80s. So
wow,
Kenny Pickett does a lot of things special for did a lot of things special for Pitt, and I think he'll do a lot of things special for the Steelers.